I'm Dimitri, company owner of DB Video. We started 25 years ago as a company providing for events all the audiovisual facilities. And then we went to broadcasts and also to new technologies, of which social media is also a very large part of it. And during those 25 years, the events became bigger and bigger. And there were also a lot of interpretations that were needed, especially on special conventions where there were international partners. And with those international partners, we had to translate into English, French, German, Dutch, Spanish, and then the other languages also afterwards for the bigger jobs we had to do. We started as a small company, very small. So first I was a cameraman, and then we started editing and all the things around. And it was a small crew. We started with, I started alone, and then we were with 2 people, 5 people, and now we are with 43 people full time, and 120 people freelance working a day for us. We don't organize the meetings, we do the technical facilities for them. So our clients are companies, big companies, the institutional companies also, institutional organizations, and a lot of event organizers. So the event organizers who do international congresses, international events, where a lot of people with different languages are passing by. So translation is always needed. We do the audiovisual coverage for NATO. And NATO, they have a lot of languages, even more than in Europe. Languages of which you never heard before. And those need to be translated or interpreted live. And all the live interactions are being done by us. So we always do live interpretation. I almost never do interpretation afterwards. It's always live. And NATO, for example, we did the big summit of NATO last year with the visit of President Trump and all the other important persons, where there were about 300 different countries there, different languages, and they all needed to be translated. And we had about 42 languages that we did there. Not always simultaneously, but let's say about 30 languages at the same time we always did the interpretation for. The problem is there's too few space in the meeting rooms. Also with the growing of Europe, has become bigger. We have so many languages that we have to do now that the rooms are too small, and you need to do remote interpretation, in which we have a good solution. We have worked very close together with the interpreters, really feeling which emotions, which feelings they really need to have. And it's not only filming a discussion like we do for television, for broadcast. It's really filming in a way interpreters want to film, to have it filmed. You always need to have a wide view of the room to see who's sitting around the table, who's discussing with whom, which are the reactions. But you also need to see the people who are talking. So you need to have them close up to do the remote interpretation in a good way. And this mix makes it a different mix of images that you need to make to do live interpretation, remote interpretation, and not live broadcast. So it's a very big difference. And that's also the way we work. We often make, not always, but often make a separate mix just for the interpreters only, in which you always have a close-up for the president of the meeting. You always have a close-up of the guests, and you have a close-up of every person who's in the meeting room. So everyone is speaking, you also have a close-up. Those images are very important for the remote interpretation. So you have, as interpreter, even not being in the room, the feeling that you are there. So you can see or feel more the emotions. And a big advantage there, because the remote interpretation isn't always negative, in contrary, in my opinion, as a technician, it's even better than being in the room. I don't think a lot of interpreters will like to hear it, but with the remote interpretation, we can give more angles of view with the cameras we have, and we put several screens in front of the interpretation booth on a distance that is good for the interpreters to view, that it's not too light. You can really have the same feeling as being in the room, but always with the different angles that you never have with your interpretation booth. Because your interpretation booth can be on the left side of the room, on the right side of the room, and the person for whom you're interpreting, doing the interpretation, is maybe too far from you. But with the remote interpretation, you see him always in close-up. So that's the really big difference that you have with the remote interpretation now. We're filming 4K already. To be honest, the distribution is done in HD. This is depending on the distances between the buildings. So sometimes we do remote interpretation. So we have a conference in Paris, and the people who are doing the translation are in Brussels, Germany, Czechoslovakia, everywhere a little bit. We send the images to them. So there's a little delay of 1 second, not more. And they do the remote interpretation, and we put the signals back to the meeting room, so the translation can be done in live. We work for sound via internet on video and audio over IP. It's not internet quality, it's full broadcast quality, so television quality. Also for the delays, because when you work in internet, you also have a delay of 10 to 20 seconds. That's a delay you cannot afford in live interpretation. So we have our own systems which guarantee the high quality of audio levels. It's a bit like the radio transmissions you're doing in live. This is the same technology we're using for our kind of remote interpretation. If there's a whispering of sound or something, it's really cut off. So once you're going above 80 decibels, not 90, 90 is the limit, 80 decibels, once you go over that, it cuts off. Only if it's spoken, then it cuts back to 60 decibels. But if it's really a microphone who's doing a whispering sound, it's cut off. We make, like I said before, we always make a separate mix, image mix for the interpreters. So if there are documents like PowerPoints, keynotes, or any other presentation, Prezi or whatever, we take the live screenshots in full quality and send it on a separate screen for the interpreters. So they have the same feeling as being in the room. So they are in the room, they see the presentation of the person who's speaking, they see the close-up of the person who's speaking, so they can really follow everything. Also, extra, if we have the presentations on time, what's not always the case, then we can print it or send it digitally, and they can put it on the screen also. We are always with minimum 3 persons for a remote interpretation. So if we have one director who's doing the special directing for the remote interpretation, so it's not broadcast direction for television purposes, it's really only for the interpreters that we're doing a separate mix of the images. There are 2 kinds of events we do. Or we put the booths ourselves in a space that's quite near to the event. For example, if you do the European summits for the Council, European Council, it's the Council does the managing part, manages all the part. We only do the technical part. So the interpretation booths who are in the rooms already, they are being used, of course. But the interpreters who cannot be in the room, there's going to be a remote interpretation. So we have our cameras in the meeting room. They send the signal to the remote interpretation room, where we put about, now it's 23 cabins that we put, with monitoring of the different angles and the different persons joining the meeting. For events, then we're talking not about the institutional clients of us, but for events. We, for example, have Euroclear, that's the bank of the banks. So the international SWIFT money transactions and everything. So for them it's very difficult to travel. It's also too dangerous to travel for those persons. And they stay at home and doing via video conference a meeting. But also, we also need live interpretation there. So the video conferencing is sent to the interpreters, and we ingest the interpreted sounds again with the video conferencing. So this is the other way of meetings that we do. If they have their own equipment, what's nowadays more and more the case, not for every interpreter, but for a lot of interpreters, they have just a small corner at home in which they receive our signal over internet, but high level internet, I mean, and because the delays cannot be allowed in remote interpretation, so you need to have a good internet connection, and then we can do remote interpretation without a problem. At this moment, we are delivering the most equipment to the interpreters, and with the interpreters with whom we work, we say, okay, it's that equipment, and we'll give it to you for this meeting, and then we'll take it back, because the quality needs to be so high, the level, because the worst thing you can have is to have interpretation without a good sound. With the system we have silence cutters. We have noise cutters, not silence cutters, but noise cutters. So if the interpreter's speaking in the mic, the microphone is open. If he's not speaking, you hear the level of noise coming up, but then it's cut off. So also for the people who are in the meeting, listening to the translation, they don't, they hear the noise coming up a little bit, but they're not going to be annoyed. Or if there are children walking around sometimes, if you're interpreting at home, it's not happening a lot, but it happens. This is noise that's being cut off, because it's only the microphone noise that's being taken. And that's also the reason why we prefer to put our equipment at the interpreters, leaving it there, because we're working on a regular basis with them, and they can use it every time. There's always a security problem. Once you go out of a room, there's a security problem. But via the connections we use, we're using encrypted sound. So everything what's going on internet is encrypted. So if you take it out and you don't have the same machines, and the machines we are using is a special code, you can encrypt it, but it's not open air protocol. It's not open for everyone. So you really need to have this kind of machine and this kind of equipment to disencrypt the signal. And you can also say this machine is connected with our equipment there, and this is the only way it can be encrypted. So the level is very high. We need to do that because in a lot of meetings of which we do, it's annual meetings where the numbers of sales have to be discussed, etc. The clients, it's really necessary that it's really closed information. And also you need to have a passcode to enter to the system. And the passcode is changing every 5 minutes. So the maximum we did now was 48 languages at the same time. Technically we can go further. We can go to 56 languages without a problem. But it's not always needed. But to come back to your question of is there a possibility in the future that there will be interpreters sitting in a building and doing the whole day nothing else? It's going to be the future, yeah. It's going to be the future. In my opinion, it's going to be certainly the future, because traveling, not only for interpreters, also for people, managers from international companies, from multinationals, they don't travel anymore. They're doing video conferencing now. They're doing audio conferencing, video conferencing, Skype, even simple Skype or FaceTime even. They're doing the meetings like that because they don't need to travel so much. They lose less of time. It's better for the environment, and it's also better for everyone. So, and that's the same thing is going to happen with the interpreters. I really admire your work, because without interpreters there wouldn't be any reunion, any meeting. I mean, the way you have to interpret, it's really such high level and such a high level of concentration you need to have. It's really difficult, and I can understand that remote interpretation is really a step higher in the level of interpretation you have to do. But the markets, the people are changing, the world is changing. Before we had to wait 2-3 days to get equipment. Now it's just you send an email and within 2 hours it's delivered, or the day after everything is delivered. So everything is changing. So we have to adapt to the new community we are living in. It's a practical problem. We have started remote interpretation because there was a lack of room in the meeting rooms. There are too many languages now, so we don't have the place to put the interpreters. So that was the only solution. And now, with the quality of sound we have, with the minimum of delay of sound, the quality of image we have, you have a better view in remote interpretation than you have in the room. The atmosphere, the personal touch, I can agree with that. The feeling being together with the persons who are in the meeting is a little bit more distant. But I see it like looking at a movie. When it's a good movie, you can cry. When it's a bad movie, you feel a distance. You feel a distance. When it's really a good movie, or you put yourself above the reality, and you feel that you're really going into the meeting or the movie, then you have the atmosphere being in it. But there is a problem, a little bit of the person itself. Do you allow to go further? Do you allow to cry in a movie? Or don't you allow yourself to cry in a movie? That's the difference. And that's with remote interpretation the same. Or you don't have the place to be there and you need to sit in another room and see nothing. Or you do fully remote interpretation with the luxury having 4 or 5 cameras, seeing all the angles of the meeting room, seeing every person who's talking, feeling the reactions that the director decides, of course, but it's the director especially for the interpreters. That's the difference. And that's something you need to be ready for. And if you are ready for that, I don't feel there's going to be any problem anymore. It's maybe hard I'm saying that, but I'm not the one that would decide. It's not our decision. It's a practical decision. And reality versus feasibility also needs to be measured.